Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I It's alive!
Welcome to where the weird ones are.
Every time I speak, I want the truth to come out.
Powerful figures in Hollywood as well as powerful politicians who are in fact not human. They're reptiles or they're lizards or perhaps extraterrestrials.
I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch.
Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.
Let's get weird.
What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to another episode of Where the Weird Ones Are. My name is Kevin, but you probably already knew that, and if you didn't, now you do. Today's episode is with J.B. Caine. She is a author of quite a few books. We discussed a couple of them. She has two different series, so definitely go check them out. Her links will be in the show notes. She's a phenomenal person. She comes on, talks about a lot of her paranormal experiences, what got her into writing and stuff. And, she didn't publish until her later years, which I see that a lot. A lot of writers tend to, kind of like end up getting published, once they're older, which I mean, I don't think there's a problem with it, but I just noticed this trend, and I say that to say this, if you see something, if you there's something that you want, you know, go get it. I mean, we talk a little bit about this, like risk versus reward. um Whether it's, you don't want to take the risk to do something that you want to do or that you love to do, um and it tends to hold you back. You don't know that you're gonna fail unless you fucking do it, you know? So, yeah, we talk about her paranormal experiences. We talk about, her journey as an empath. We talk about her encounter with a shadow person. Um, and we talk about her connection with the other side. And she has some really super interesting stories. And that we talk about, intentions and beliefs, which is goes into like the whole writing aspect of everything, as well as paranormal. Your belief and your intentions, you set intentions when you're doing all this stuff, and she has some life-changing stories thrown in there as well. So it was a good conversation. It was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed this one a lot. She's a lovely lady. Really, really dug this one for sure. Um, but with that all being said, if you are looking to flavor your food with something really tasty, I highly recommend Bigfoot's Breath by Flavors of the Forest. Uh, Yeah. Anyways, so it's raw garlic dust. It's freaking tasty as hell. I really enjoy it. If you're into, making your own pizza doughs and stuff like that, you can throw that in there. Even pizza sauce or whatever, or just sprinkle it on the top of your pizza, or making your own garlic bread, or throwing it into the meat with your cheeseburger, your chicken, whatever you're cooking and you kind of want a garlicky taste, like this is a good powder to use. Don't use the store brand shit because they just fill it with a bunch of bullshit and then they tell you it's organic when it's not. But As you can see, if you're watching the YouTube, it is very white, just like the Lord intended it to be. Um, the actual garlic cloves are white, so why isn't the powder ever white? Um, but yeah, so go check them out, flavorsforest.com/weird, and get yourself some garlic dust today. Um, you won't be disappointed, I promise you. It's way better than anything that you're gonna get at the store. So just throwing that out there. Also, Cryptid Fest is coming up real quick. It's September 14th. I will be speaking and I will be vending. I will have hot sauce there. Um, so please come on down to Raynham, Massachusetts to the VFW. Um, I'll probably put the link in, which I never do for all these events. I never put the link into the show, but maybe I should try and figure that out so you guys don't have to. So Raynham, Massachusetts, again, September 14th. It's 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Um, Cash bar. So if you want some drinks, you can definitely get some there. So with that being said, um, also have Cryptid Halloween 3 in West Virginia. More details for that as it gets closer. That's in October. And then I will be at Cryptid Con in November. Not vending or anything, just hanging out and checking out the other speakers and the other people that are, you know, also hanging out, um, selling shit. So um, yeah, so please like, follow, share, subscribe, leave a rating and review. I'd greatly appreciate it. If your podcatcher does not allow a review, and you would like to leave one, you can leave one on the website. That's where the weird ones are podcast.com. There you can also find the hot sauce, you can find the merch, all the t-shirts and all that shit. You can find a photo gallery of people who've gotten merch and sent me a picture. So the blog, the donation for the documentaries that I'm going to be starting to film here soon. First one is going to be about my hometown and all the ghostly things that happen around here. So, um, and then I am also looking for a graphic designer. I need, more t-shirt. I'm trying to get more t-shirt designs done, and everything. Emily is gotten too busy and she needed to cut some things from her schedule. Um, and after her and I talking, we decided that it was probably the best bet for her. The best thing for her to do um, would be for me to try and find somebody else. Um, so it just I don't know, just throwing it out there. I would like to get somebody so that I can do comic book, which Emily was trying to just, you know, life happens, man. Life fucking happens, and I get it. So, but yeah. So if anybody is interested in helping me out with designs and stuff, please hit me up on Instagram where _ the weird ones are, or the email where the weird ones are at gmail.com. Also, if you want to be featured on the show, you can also hit me up on those avenues as well. Um, so yeah, just give a brief synopsis of your stories. It doesn't nothing not too detailed, so I'm still a little bit surprised. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a beautiful day, beautiful night, whatever time you have chosen to listen to this at. And yeah, please check out JB Caine and her books. She's a lovely lady, and I'm sure the books are amazing. I just have not read them, but I will. I will. I like what the summaries for the books are. So And I definitely like series books that are in series. But anyways, yeah, I hope you guys are all doing well. Happy that you're here. Happy that you exist. Happy that you're alive. And that we get to another chance to spend another hour or two together here in the audio waves or on the fucking YouTube channel. So let's fucking get into it, shall we? Been talking way too long. I've been doing these intros way too long lately, but it's all right. It's all right. If you forgive me, I forgive me. I mainly forgive me, so I think it's gonna be okay. You know? So let's go.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Weird. Get weird.
Hey, what's going on, dudes and dudettes? This is Drewski from Cryptid Warfare and Conspiracies Podcast, and you're listening to Kevin on Where the Weird Ones Are.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode. So happy to have you here. Today I have author J.B. Caine. How's it going?
It is going, man. It is going. It's been a very busy week for me, but that which does not kill us makes us stronger, or the horrors persist and so do I, or something along those lines. But it's good. Nothing's killed me yet.
Awesome. So, for everybody who's unfamiliar with J.B. Caine's work,
Okay.
so she's an author and she's written quite a few books at this point. I had them all pulled up, but she has the Arcane series. Am I saying that correctly?
Arcana
The
Series,
Arcana.
yes.
Yeah.
It is a tarot-based, witchy-flavored young adult paranormal trilogy.
Okay. That's interesting. What were these your first books, or were the Ironshields
So
Ironshields Shadow
Ironshields
your
Shadow
first?
is a high fantasy series, kind of Dungeons and Dragons flavors. So it's a very different
Oh,
kind of
okay.
thing. But I would say they kind of formed kind of overlappingly. That's not
Mm-hmm.
really a word, but I just made it up because I'm a writer. But but yeah, the first book that I ever completed, I started probably a bunch of books, but the first book I ever completed was book 1 of the Arcana series, which is Rise of the Moon. And then after that one, I wrote Rush to Judgment, which is the second book in the series. And then I wrote the first 4 Iron Shield books in between. And then I wrote the third book in the Arcana trilogy. And that is actually going to be released probably by the time your listeners hear this podcast. So all 3
Nice.
of the trilogy will be out in the wild, and I am currently working on book 5 of Iron Shield. So
That's awesome. I've been ever since I was a kid, wanted to be a writer. So every time I have somebody who has authored a book, I kind of get excited to talk to them and pick their brain about their process and their inspirations. So did you find inspiration like early on? Like, was this a later in life thing when you started this, or?
well, so I've always been a storyteller mindset. You know, I
Yeah.
wasn't always writing novels, but I was always making up stories in my head. I wrote some short stories when I was younger. I wrote some poetry when I was younger and angsty. And I always knew, though, and I even wrote a couple of short screenplays with a director friend of mine, but I always knew deep in my soul that I was a novelist. That's where my heart always was, but I just never seemed to pull the trigger and complete one until I started Rise of the Moon during the National Novel Writing Month on, they have a website, nanowrimo.org, and I started it on that. The goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. That's the challenge. And I just kind of, even though I was teaching full time, I made the commitment, I'm going to force myself to get this done because, you know, the writer is the person who finishes the book. So, you
Right.
know, if I wanted to be a novelist, if I ever wanted to get a shot at that, then I had to push through the middle part of the book, which any writer will tell you the middle part of the book is the hardest part to write. You know how you want it to start, you know how you want it to end, but then you've got to fight your way through everything to get there. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was always in me, but it just didn't start coming out in novelist form until I started Rise of the Moon in 2019.
2019. So what was the inspiration behind? Were you always interested in like the witchy stuff and
Oh,
all
definitely.
that?
So I've definitely been inclined toward the paranormal, the metaphysical, um, all that kind of stuff. I've always leaned heavily into that and been very interested in that. And the tarot cards and things like that. That's always been something that's fascinated me. I've had some really crazy experiences, which I know we're going to talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's always sort of been in my DNA, as it were. So, the actual specific inspiration for Rise of the Moon, my husband is amazing at being supportive of my writing. And he gave me one of these books with like 100 writing prompts in it for Christmas of
That's
2018.
cool.
And I had gone through the book and looked at it. And when I decided I was going to do National Novel Writing Month, I was just going through there and looking for ideas. And I came across a prompt in there that sort of, I was like, this gives me some ideas. And I was a high school teacher for 30 years before I retired. And the original idea that came from this book, which this is a morphed version of what was in the book, but the idea it gave me was a situation where there was a high school girl who was a junior who was doing a performance on stage in like a one act kind of competition thing. She had written it and she was doing sort of this thing where it was based on the Salem witch trials and what it would be like if a real witch lived during the Salem witch trials, as opposed to the people who were not actually witches who all got executed during the Salem witch trials. So, in the idea, she's doing this elaborate dance on stage, and she's barefoot and cuts her foot as she's dancing. And the dance is mimicking. It's sort of like supposed to represent a drawing down the moon ritual. And so as she's dancing, she doesn't realize that it actually works because she's invoked the power by bleeding on the stage. Um, and so that was the original idea of where it started. And then, you know, she would get all these powers and all this kind of stuff. That's not exactly how the book ended up, though. That scene does occur, but
Uh-huh.
that is not the basis of the book. So the book actually formed itself around that idea during National Novel Writing Month. But that is a little bit of a
That's
teaser.
awesome.
That is sort of the inciting incident of when she starts to realize that life is going to be a little bit different. And other people realize it before she does. So,
Nice. That's awesome. I find myself struggling after chapter 2 when I write. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like right after chapter 2, I'm just like, oh, where do I want to go? Like I know how the whole story how I want to go with the whole story. Obviously, like you said, I know how to start it and I know how I want to end it, and I know a bunch of like little fillers, but where do I put those fillers in? You know what I mean?
So,
So
I'll tell you, I had really struggled with that with writing Rise of the Moon, because, of course, I'd never written a novel before. I'd read zillions of
yeah,
them, but I'd never written one. And so what I ended up doing is I actually, you know how when you make a movie, you film it out of order?
yes, yep,
Okay. So I ended up doing that with Rise of the Moon. So since I was forced to write somewhere around 1,600 words every day in order to make this word count,
mm-hmm.
I would, if I couldn't think of where to go after this scene, I would just write the next big scene. And then eventually I would just go back and come up with fillers that made sense. So I actually, whatever scene I was inspired to write that day, I would just kind of plunk it into the Word document generally where, and then I would put some asterisks bracketing it off so that I could see that there was a transition needed there, or I would write the word transition in the center or something along those lines. And then I would just go fill in the other parts later, because I really struggled with exactly what you're talking about. So the opening scene, man, I lost track of time. I was like in a time tunnel. I probably wrote for 3 hours, no problem. And then when I sat down the next day to write, I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen next. She has to go to class. Like you can't just blink and then the day is over. Something has to happen. And you can't just say, and then the next day, every time you want to make a transition. So,
yeah,
yeah, but I fought through it, and the rule of thumb for that, I personally don't believe there's such a thing as writer's block. I think writer's block is fear. It's, fear that it'll suck, fear that you're not good enough, fear that your ideas are no good. It's imposter syndrome in a way. I think it's a weird manifestation of that. So I made it my rule of thumb that you can't edit what you haven't written.
true,
Nobody threw
yeah,
Michael Phelps in the pool the first day and he was Michael Phelps, the swimmer. You
mm-hmm.
have to fight your way to get there. And that's kind of the philosophy I went by.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy. There's so many people that, weren't much of anything until they tried. Like, there's risk and reward. You got to take
Yep.
a risk for the reward.
Well, and
Um,
failure gets a bad rap. Failure's not a bad thing. Failure's a
right.
tool. Failure is
Yeah.
a tool. So if once you can let go of the fear of failure, because you realize that failure is just, it's how you get better. We have to fail a bunch of times before we get better at anything. I mean, think about anytime you work out, right?
Yep.
What's the goal every time you work out? You lift to failure every time.
Mm-hmm.
That's your goal. That's the way you grow, and it's the same concept, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I actually started writing a story on my blog on my website
Mm-hmm.
where it's chapters, but I tried to like make it so that, because I'm trying to break the dust off, just trying to
Mm-hmm.
make myself sit down and write every week. And they're written more like scenes. So like the first two, again, the first two chapters, it took me no time. I wrote it right out, and I was like, oh man, am I already done with this chapter already? Wow, that went fast,
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, I'm just struggling where I want to go with it. Like again, I'm at that point where I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I know pieces of it that I want to incorporate, and
Mm-hmm.
this one I don't know how I'm gonna end it yet. There's a couple
Yeah.
of different ways to end it, but they're written more like scenes. They're not really chapters because they're not very long. Um,
Right. Right. Sort of
but
vignettes, if you will. Yeah, I get it for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. So there's a new character that's been introduced, and 2 chapters ago I wanted to kill her, and then I was like, oh no, and she's still alive in chapter 7. So
Yeah, sometimes
um,
they really take on and they run the story themselves. You just kind of sit back and write the incident report, as the meme says.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. It's uh it's really cool. So like I said in the beginning, every time I get to talk to a writer, It's kind of like what's the freaking word? Not nostalgic, but you know, I don't know. I don't
Motivational?
know the word. Yeah, I guess.
Or
I don't know. I just feel
fires you up a little?
like awestruck and like
Oh,
I'm like, oh, I need to write. Yeah.
yeah.
Probably right after I get done talking to you, I'll probably be like, ooh, I should write a chapter.
Well, just
But
remember, I mean, if you get enough of those little vignettes written, eventually all you got to do is stack them more or less in order and try to find a way to connect them,
that's true. You're right. You know, when you're right, you're right. And when you're wrong, you're still
Hey.
right because you could have been wrong. Right. So, oh man. So, you have some paranormal experiences.
Many.
If you don't mind, we can dive into those. Let's
Sure.
say the earliest one that you can recall.
Ooh, okay. So, the earliest ones aren't actually all that interesting, from a storytelling point of view. The earliest
Yeah.
ones, it was more just I started to realize that I was an empath. And I
Oh,
kind of, you could really, I mean, you could almost write it off just to being super observant. And I did for a really long time, where somebody would say something and I would feel in my gut that there was something else, and I would know like a whole backstory, maybe that they weren't really telling me, and I could tell that the way they were behaving and the way they were feeling or were not the same. So you could really write that off as being super observant, and a lot of people do, but um, it was a little bit more than that. And it did actually cause some problems for me in high school because everybody's always fronting in high school anyway.
yeah,
um so that was sometimes kind of challenging, but I would say that sort of the really interesting parts of my paranormal journey sort of started when I was in college, because I took a class on world religions, and in the course of that, I've always been fascinated with religion. Whether it was, I kind of grew up in the Presbyterian church,
hmm,
but my parents were not religious. They wanted us to go to church because they wanted us to get a moral foundation, not so much because they were personally religious.
okay,
But I was definitely spiritual from the outset. So I definitely had a sense of a higher power, a benevolent one, and all of that. So I became very fascinated with religions, and I took world religions in college. And at that point, I feel like when you kind of put an energy out, then a lot of that stuff kind of manifests for you. If you're searching for something, it's just like Google, right? You say, I really wish I knew where to find an electric litter box. And then all of a sudden you get all the ads for the electric litter box. Well, the universe kind of works the same way. So I was interested in people from different religions. And so I just started meeting all these people from different religions. And a couple of the people I met were Wiccans. And I found that fascinating because I didn't know anything about Wicca except sort of what Hollywood tells you. So they said, hey, we're not recruiting you, but if you want to just come and see what we do, it's not like it's secret. You can come and just observe and hang out and whatever. So I did, and I found it very fascinating. But the thing about it, I didn't necessarily feel like I was a Wiccan, but I was very interested in the idea of other abilities, whether it's clairvoyance, ESP, mediumship, all of that. And that was kind of where I really got a formal introduction to all that kind of stuff. And once I started kind of learning about it, I was like, oh, so that's what that is that keeps happening to me. And I started understanding that some of the things that were happening to me were not just, well, you're just creative. So, you're making these things up in your head or whatever.
hmm,
I started to realize that sometimes the voices I was hearing were, I mean, it wasn't like schizophrenic, go stab somebody voices, but if I would have almost like a voice I would hear in my ear, and then that thing would turn out to be true, kind of thing. And what that was is that I was clairaudient. So I could hear spirits. And I didn't really know that at the time. And once I kind of was aware of that, then I started to be able to perceive things in other ways because I understood what was happening. So then it kind of cascaded, and pretty much stuff has happened to me ever since then. So that was where it began. I did have a past life regression done. The high
Oh, I
priestess
love
of
past
the
life regressions.
yeah, the high priestess of the coven that had invited me to observe stuff knew how to do that, and I had just a bizarrely inexplicable fear of a very specific type of knife. And I also had
Really?
a really weird relationship with my mother and brother. Didn't understand it. It was like if you stood outside of it and I told you all this, and I'm not going to spill all my family tea here, but if I told you about all the stuff that happened in my family, you would go, that doesn't make any sense that should happen. And it caused me a lot of internal grief because I blamed myself for things that I knew were not my fault. Things
Yeah.
like that. And when she did this regression with me, it kind of showed me that this was a loop between my mother and my brother, and I was always just kind of the side, ornament. And so it really wasn't about me. It was all about them. And at that point, I could kind of let go of all that guilt. So people can argue about whether or not that's real, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be real to them. But because it connected with me, it released all that guilt from me. So whether you believe in past life regression or you don't, which I do, but even if you don't, you could argue that it was an effective psychological tool to make me let go of guilt that I shouldn't have been holding on to. So either way, it was effective. But then, ever since then I started
mental
having,
health.
yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely.
Mental health
Oh no,
is
that's absolutely true
so
because,
important.
yeah, if I hadn't been able to let go of some of that stuff, I probably would have carried some really negative things forward that were not my burden to carry.
Yeah,
They were someone
especially
else's.
learning your clairaudience and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And if you, I assume that you've worked it out, like you've worked
Oh yeah.
out with it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like carrying around that guilt, that trauma could only
Hmm.
open you up more to negativity.
Correct. Once I understood, kind of going back to the clairaudience thing, once I kind of understood what that was happening to me, then it wasn't scary anymore,
Mm,
right? It was because
yeah.
the vast majority of spirits are just people. So it's just somebody who vibrates at a different frequency than you do. So,
Yeah.
um, most of them, they're not bad. They're not trying to scare you. They might, I don't see them usually. I've only physically seen a couple of things. Usually I just
Hmm.
hear it or I feel it. Um, but people who have seen things tell me that, a lot of times they don't maybe look the way you would like them to look. But that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they don't look like, angels.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But
So you've
but
never seen an apparition or anything. It's just hearing and feeling.
so mostly, I've had a couple of experiences where I've seen things. The first time that I saw something, um, where there was no way for me to explain it away as something else. It was shortly after I had really started learning this kind of stuff, and there was if you know what a shadow person is,
Yeah,
have
yeah.
you?
I've seen those
Yeah,
like my entire life.
yeah. So shadow people are not just like nice people, ghosts. In my experience, they may not be evil, but they certainly give off a vibration that is uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Right? They may not be there to do harm, but they don't feel like they're like us or were ever like us. So I was in my room, in my apartment when I was in college. And I looked over and I saw a shadow person, like literally no question, eyes wide open. I was not asleep. Looked over and I could see a shadow person sort of huddled, almost like you would be if you were getting ready to um, skydive, where you kind of cross your arms in front of you and you bend your legs like you're about to jump. So
Yeah.
it was in that pose, and I just kind of sat there and I looked at it. And I was like, oh, and I didn't like the feel of it at all. And I was really fortunate that I had had this experience with the Wiccans that I had become friends with, because they had kind of explained to me how to handle something like that, and the fact that in a case like that, it, even if something is negative, it only has the power you're willing to give it. So if it's your space and you've claimed that it's your space, you can tell it to leave. And so I looked at it and I literally said out loud, and this would probably be in like a comedy spoof of a horror movie. I just looked at this thing and I said, "You're making me very uncomfortable and I need you to leave. This is my space." So I sounded like a millennial. It's just like, yes, this is I need you to leave my space. Hey, look, sorry, I'm a Gen Xer. That's what we do.
Yeah.
But I said, I need you to leave my space. And then it just kind of sank through the floor. Like it never actually moved its position. It stayed in it, but then it just sort of sank through the floor. And I just literally sat there and stared at the corner and just said the Lord's Prayer over and over and over again till it was gone. And I didn't see another one of those for a very long time. So those have been pretty rare in my experience. The only other time that I saw something, well, no, that's not true. The one time that I saw something that was really physical, it was actually an ongoing haunting of someone who was there specifically to see me. So this is actually one of my good stories. So when I was in my senior year of college, I did an exchange program where I went over to England, and I lived in England for 4.5 months, and taught at a school over there, did my internship over there, and I was living in a dorm on the southern English coast in Brighton, overlooking the beach in the English Channel, which was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, and I was on the 4th floor of this place. Well, before I actually moved into that, I was traveling around mainland Europe just for a couple of weeks before the school term started, with a couple of other people. And so I was traveling with these two other women, and at one point we were walking around in Rome, and my now husband, then boyfriend, his birthday was the next day. So it was September 8th. And all of a sudden I just stopped on the Spanish Steps in Rome, and I just said, I need to go find a phone right now, which was weird because I was going to call Buck the next day because, that you still had to pay for long distance back then. No WhatsApp out there. So I was like, I have to go find a phone right now. Right now, I have to find a phone. So I said goodbye to the girls I was traveling with, and I said, look, I'll meet you back at the boarding house. I have to go. So I found a payphone and called, and at the exact moment I started feeling that, my husband had gotten word that his best friend had died unexpectedly of a strange heart condition. And he had started praying that I would call. And so I immediately got that message and I called him, and, and so we talked about it and stuff like that. And, in the course of that conversation, I think he relayed to me, just kind of what he was going through or whatever. Then fast forward a couple of months to when I was living in that dorm that was out overlooking the English Channel, and I was on the 4th floor, and my window, there was like an outside hallway that, that was like, it was just windows out to the sea. There weren't rooms on both sides. It was just like a one-sided hallway. The rooms are all on one side. The other side was windows to the sea. And so I was lying in I had just gotten in, my roommate was out, and I was just kind of settling in to go to bed. And I was having, if the women who listen to your show will know what I'm talking about. When you get a bunch of women together in an enclosed area, there's going to be conflict. And there was conflict starting, and I'm the most not drama person ever. I hate, little piddlety drama and that kind of stuff. And that was going on, and people were mad at me because I wouldn't talk about other people and blah blah. And it was this whole mess, and I was feeling a lot of stress about it. So I was sitting there and I was thinking about that as I was getting ready to go to bed, and I looked over and there was light from the outside. The moonlight was coming through the window, and the moonlight would hit a spot on the wall and create a reflection in the wall mirror that was in the room. And I looked over and I saw in that reflection, I saw the outline of my husband's best friend. And Mike's
Whoa.
silhouette was there. And I just looked at him, and I mean, I couldn't see his features. It was just a silhouette, but I was like, "Hey, man." And he said to me, "You don't need to worry about any of those girls. You need to worry about staying friends with this one, and don't worry about the rest of them. You're never going to hear from them after college. Don't worry about it. Make peace with these two. Don't worry about the other ones." And I went, "All right." And then he was gone. And I, even though he wasn't there, I kind of had the feeling he was still around. I was like, "Hey, feel free to pop by anytime," And then
Yeah.
anytime I would walk across the dorm through that outside hallway on the upper floor, and like I said, it's on the 4th floor. There was nothing on the other side. And these knocks would follow me down the hallway every time I walked down that hallway. And I knew that was Mike just saying, "Hey, I'm still around. Don't worry about it." So that was one of my better stories. That was like
amazing.
a kind of wholesome, warm, fuzzy story.
Yeah.
And I found out later that Buck had actually asked Mike to watch over me while I was overseas.
No way. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Hey everyone, I'm Shelly.
And I'm Eric.
And we're the hosts of Gruesome and Unnatural, a true crime podcast about murder, cold cases, missing people, and just unnatural.
Join us every Monday where Shelly tells me gruesome stories that absolutely with me.
Yeah, subscribe and listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's stuff like that is super interesting, because because you can't see them. Like, how did he talk to you? Did he talk to you vocally, or was it like a mind speak?
So it's kind of in between. And I've heard other people who are clairaudience say the same thing. You know how when you're reading a book, you hear your voice in your head, but you're skipping words, but you're getting all the ideas?
Yeah.
That's what clairaudience sounds like to me. So I'm getting all the information, but I'm not hearing every single word clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just getting all the information. And every once in a while, I'll get a flash of an image, like a picture they want me to see to make sure that I'm getting the point of what they're trying to say. But in Mike's case, it was clear as a bell. Like there was no question, word for word, what he was saying. It was literally like a conversation, except that I don't think that if somebody else was in the room, I don't think they would have heard it. So I think it was just for me. But had I not known who it was and known the situation, then I probably would have thought that he was sitting in the room with me. So.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because the only thing, the reason why I asked like how you were hearing it is because I've had an experience where I'm pretty sure my uncle sat on my side, the side of my bed near my feet, and it was just like I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear him speak or anything, but at first I was scared when I felt it. Like felt the bed weigh down, like the pressure, and I was like, "What's that?" and like I knew nobody was there, and then I just got this like overwhelming sensation of like just warmth, and I got a picture in my
Reassurance.
mind of
Yeah.
of my uncle. It was like it was just like all of a sudden I knew it was my uncle, and it was just like everything's gonna be okay kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, 9
like
times
that's
out
what I
of
got
10,
from it.
my experience is that they either just want you to know that they're okay, or they want you to know that you're going to be okay. It's usually one of
Yeah,
those two things.
yeah, that's really interesting. And going back to that shadow person that sunk through the floor, it's really interesting. You know, a lot of people obviously don't believe in like a higher power or anything, but it seems to me, I mean, even when, um, like going back into the history of the Bible and everything like that, where the name Jesus isn't technically the name of the person, but it seems to be whenever you use it, when you're having one of these experiences, it works. So there has to be, I don't, would that be manifestation? Like, because a mass
Well,
manifestation where everybody's using the name, so it has that power?
well, I think it's all about attention and intention, right? Because I think anything that people define as magic is just the power of your intention with will behind it. And
Yeah.
you could I think that if your belief was in Jesus as Jesus, you could call him Frank, and the response would be the same because your feelings would be the same and your
Yeah.
heart would be the same. Um, and I think
That
that
makes
the
sense.
name is just a focal point that kind of makes people know this is who I'm addressing. This is the energy that I'm addressing. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that
Do you
makes
mind if I
sense.
take a
That makes
quick
sense.
pause? I hate to do that to you, but I have a
Yeah, go right ahead.
thing. Right, I'll be right back. Sorry.
All right.
So sorry, I had a situation developing that I had to go handle right outside my office.
It's okay.
But yeah, I think attention and intention is sort of the focal point of any prayer, and any attempt to manifest things in your life, or, what Wiccans talk about as, quote, spellcraft or whatever. It's really about focusing your attention and your intention to a specific outcome. And, so I think that's probably, if your intention is to reach the energy of the other power that you worship, then that name is a focal point for you.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. I believe in the power of manifestation to begin with, so it's just like, if you're gonna view the world or yourself as shit, your day is gonna be shit. It's just like,
100%.
if you're negative, everything's gonna be negative. You're only gonna see the negative. If you're positive, then you're gonna see the positive. So it's just how you look at things. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
yeah, I think I've used the name Jesus once, and there was something in my son's room. My studio used to be upstairs, right across the hallway from my son's room, and I saw something like flick by his doorway, and I just like stood up from this chair, and I was just like, "What was that?" And my dog even saw it and was looking at it, and then something fell in my son's room, and I was like, "In the name of Jesus, get out of here! You are not welcome!" And I just started screaming, and my dog's like, "What the heck is happening?" But after
and that's
that,
because
nothing ever happened.
Yeah, no, but that's because in your heart you recognized that name as something that invoked the power of something good. It was the same as like when I saw that shadow person and I just said the Lord's Prayer till it went away, right? Like it's because it, according to the upbringing that I had, and like I said, it's not that I was necessarily overwhelmingly religious, but I was definitely spiritual, and I believed in a benevolent other power. So that prayer that I was taught as a kid and that I had memorized, I knew would focus me toward surrounding myself with good energy and the power of this benevolent universal spirit, or whatever name you want to attach to it. But I knew that would bring me to the God that I understood as a child, to say the Lord's Prayer, and that would protect me from anything negative. So, and because I believed it so strongly, it worked. So, and because, you have to own it.
Yeah, that's true. Now, if you don't mind, if you want to take a second and talk about your podcast real quick in the middle of your stories. I've meant to bring it up in the beginning when we were talking about your books, but it right over my head. So what got you started in doing, like, what made you want to do the podcast to begin with?
So there's actually, and these kind of stories that are sort of like pivotal moments for people is the concept of what our podcast is. So it's sort of, there is actually a natural segue there. But I was on a podcast called The Storyteller's Saga that was hosted by Micah Campbell, who is my friend and publisher. And this is sort of when we met, is that I was sort of coming out into the writing community on Instagram, and I met up with him online, and he was like, "Hey, I do this podcast. Do you want to be a guest?" And I was like, "Sure." Well, the first guest he had on was author Betsy Kulikowski, who I know that you are very well aware of. So Betsy was his first guest, and I was his second. And he told me a little bit in the intro about well, Betsy, she's really into Bigfoot and she likes to, go on adventures and all stuff. And I said, and there's a link to it on my website, so you can verify that I'm not making this up. I said, Betsy and I are going to be best friends. And then fast forward a little bit, Micah was doing a charity anthology of horror stories called Autumn Tales. And so he tapped Betsy to write one, and he tapped me to write one, and then 10 other authors as well. And through this online chat, Betsy and I just started chatting each other up. And Betsy lives in Oklahoma City, and so she had mentioned WriterCon, which is a big convention for writers. There's all kinds of courses and stuff like that happens over Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City. So I thought about going, but I was like, I don't know. I've never been to one of these things. And something kept telling me I should go. And so eventually I just kind of, I remember I called Betsy from an airport. I said, hey, do you mind if I just call you instead of chatting with you online and talk to you about this thing? So I did. And she didn't try to make me go, but she answered my questions very honestly. And I was like, I need to go. I need to go to this thing. Well, I did go to WriterCon, and it was life-changing, and I absolutely love it. I'm going again this year. And in fact, this year I'm actually going to be a speaker. I'm doing some stuff. Yay. Yeah, I know. I'm doing a couple of workshops with Betsy, and then I'm doing a couple of solo things as well. And I'm also giving feedback to writers on pages submissions that they send in. So,
Nice.
but when I got there and I met Betsy, and we were already thick as thieves by this time, we had just never met in the flesh. Well, she introduced me to Jenny LaBranche, and she and Jenny had been talking for a while about, wow, it would be fun to do a podcast. And Betsy wanted to call it Unfreakingbelievable, because that's something that a character named Rowan in one of her books says a lot. Anytime he wants to swear, he says Unfreakingbelievable. So the concept that they had come up with was to have people on, writers, actors, film people, whatever, whoever they could get, including just, the plumber down the street or whatever. If they had a really good story of a moment in their lives that kind of changed the trajectory of where they were going. This kind of like this inciting incident. Writers always talk about inciting incidents. You have this inciting incident that changed the direction of your life. And that was the concept.
Mm-hmm.
You get these people on, you interview them and have them tell their unfreaking believable story. So that's, at that point, the podcast was born. And so WriterCon was Labor Day weekend, and our first episode aired on January 11th of 2024. And so I think we're 15 episodes in at this point. Seems about right. My math ain't mathin'. I apologize. But we've had incredible guests, many of whom were people we connected with through WriterCon. So we've had New York Times bestselling authors Tosca Lee, Robert Dugoni. We've had the people who run WriterCon were kind enough to come on. Screenwriter Bob Sines has come on. Director Daniel Cox, who won BAFTA awards and a Cannes Golden Lion. So we've had some incredible people who've been so gracious to come on our show, and we just love to hear stories because we really believe life is stranger than fiction. You can't, people who say you can't make this shit up. We really believe you can't make this shit up. So we want to hear the stories, and so some of them come on and they tell us a story about a paranormal experience that kind of broadened their perspective. Some tell us about a moment of dumb luck. Some tell us about a miracle. Sean Lehman from the Mako podcast came on and talked to us about, a really a near-death experience that he had. And
yes, yeah.
So we've collected this amazing panoply of stories. I'm going to drop some vocab on you, of stories of people that are just it changed who they are, even if it just changed their perspective and gave them the courage to try something or made them realize something about themselves that maybe they didn't know was there before or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
and we love those stories. We love to hear about those things. And of course, we give people, if they have something to promote, we obviously give them the opportunity to promote their latest book or movie or whatever as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we have such a good time. And we got together actually and met again live. My husband for Christmas gave the three of us a writer's getaway in Blue Ridge, Georgia. So
Oh, that's
we
awesome.
got we got an Airbnb
What
and
a
we
nice
went
guy.
and caused all kinds of shenanigans in Blue Ridge, Georgia, and had a great time there. And unfortunately, Jenny will not be able to join us at WriterCon this year because she's got some
Oh, no.
medical stuff that she's dealing with. But she'll be there in spirit, and no doubt we'll call her in at some point. We'll do a live podcast from WriterCon, so that should be fun.
That should be fun, yeah. Do you guys do weekly episodes or bi-weekly, or how's that go?
So we have 2 episodes a month. They come out on the 11th and the 27th of each month.
Okay.
We chose those dates for very specific reasons, which seem so arbitrary. But we wanted our first podcast to occur on an angel number. So it was 111. And we felt like that was really auspicious for new beginnings. So we had it come out on the 11th. And then 27 has just always been my lucky number. And oddly enough, I think they both felt that it was a lucky number for them too. So we said, okay, then that's the other day. So the 11th and the 27th of every month, we drop a new episode. Then we're on Spotify, Audible, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Did I say Spotify?
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, those were, yeah.
Nice.
And soon we're going to be on
Nice.
YouTube, but audio only because we don't make people look pretty for our podcast.
I don't think I do either, but they don't seem to mind. YouTube is doing the YouTube thing is interesting. It's sometimes I get frustrated with it just because it takes so long to upload to it. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm gonna have to convert all of our audio files to video files because that was not something we were gonna do originally. So I'm gonna have to. So I've just been putting it off. I'm the sound engineer in addition to everything else. So I've just been deprioritizing it, and I shouldn't. But we will.
Well, the cool thing about this.
Huh?
The cool thing about this is that it gives you video and audio, so it gives you both aspects.
Yeah, we use Podcastle to record, and we can record video. We choose not to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we can, but we wanted it to be kind of like a radio show, so we didn't necessarily want to do video. So what that probably means is that I'll just put a stock image in there, maybe like the headshot of whoever it is we're interviewing, and that'll be sort of our screensaver. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, a lot of podcasts are on YouTube that don't use video. They just use their audio and they put some kind of background picture with it. And then you got those audio lines going across it and whatnot. So
yeah, those are old school.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting to me the amount of people that want to watch a podcast on YouTube rather than because I prefer to listen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I listen when I go to the gym. That's when I podcast. So
yeah, I listen whenever I'm doing something that I can listen to. Whether it's at work, it's usually at work mainly. Sometimes I'll put my little speaker outside when I'm doing yard work and play it during that. Obviously I can't hear it when I'm mowing the lawn, but it's still playing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of changed my mind about the YouTube thing after talking to Micah Campbell yet again.
Yeah.
Because he also has a podcast called Icarin Inc. That he does with Chelsea McKenna, and I listen to theirs a lot, and they have it on YouTube, and they have it in both audio and video format, so you can watch them if you want to, but you don't have to. They also have the audio on there, and I I asked him about that. I said, you know, we kind of decided not to do YouTube because who would go to YouTube to listen to a podcast? That seemed odd. He's like, no, man, that's where I get all my listens. And I was like, all right. So I guess that's going to probably be a couple days project that I'm just going to have to commit to and treat it like a full-time job for a couple of days to get everything transferred over. But
yeah, that's the weird thing about podcasts is that like I didn't realize how much I thought like I'd hit the record button and then put it into a thing and it would just be I would just put it out and that would be it. But no, there's a lot to it, a lot more to it than that, you know. So
the magic of
obviously,
sound editing.
yeah. And then if I say something that I think is like really stupid, it makes me sound dumb, or if the guest says something and they're like, "Hey, can you delete that out of there? I shouldn't have said that." You know, it's and then you got to go in there and take like little snippets out of it and stuff like that. So,
well, and I will tell you a little trade secret, which is not known to our listeners, but there's an entire episode where Betsy wasn't even there. And so we basically, she couldn't make it. She was at a safety conference, but she didn't want to like be not there. But so literally we recorded the whole episode with Jenny and me and the guest. And then we went back and we re-recorded the intro and the outro. And I just had Betsy record questions and some of the things she always says, like little B-roll kind of stuff. And I just plunked it in there. And when you listen to it, like, I challenge you right now, and I don't know if there's any of our listeners listening to you right now, but I challenge anybody, if you listen to the Unfreakingbelievable podcast, if you can tell me which episode Betsy wasn't even on, I will give a schmiv-away for that. I don't know what it'll be because I just made it up right now, but I challenge people to tell me which one that was.
I'm gonna have to go figure it out.
Yeah, see it's Hollywood magic, man.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with this stuff, you know.
Sure.
So
well, especially because it's recording in 4 tracks for us because there's 4 of us.
Yeah.
And then our sound effects and music is a 5th track. So you can literally change the order of everything. It's like cutting and pasting in a document.
Yeah. It's fun though. I have fun, and by the looks of it, from Instagram anyway, you guys seem to be having fun.
Oh
with
yeah,
it.
that's we have a blast with it.
Yeah, and that's I think once it's not fun, that's when it's like, all right, you know, time to stop doing this because I'm not having fun anymore. Which hopefully that never happens for you or I. You know, I didn't start this podcast trying to like get followers or listeners or anything like that. I just wanted to have these conversations like this. And you know, there just happens to be a bunch of people out there that want to hear it. So
well, you know, I think that's like anything
cool.
creative, and I have these conversations with friends of mine all the time. When you create something, you create it because it's something you want to consume or something that makes something satisfied in you, and then your audience will find it eventually. The people who also would enjoy it, they'll find it. So when you write a book, you should write the book you want to read. When you're doing a podcast, you should do the podcast you want to listen to. You know, when you're making art, you should make the art you want to see. And then that passion and that enjoyment will come across in the art in the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a weird question for you that I like to ask everybody that I'm not 100% sure because I'll just ask, have you ever had an experience with something that you could attribute to a cryptid or an alien of some kind?
So I should preface this by saying I really want to believe, right? I have a very scientific mind. I do. But part of my scientific mind is a natural curiosity and a natural acknowledgement that there is shit we don't know and shit we don't understand. And I thoroughly believe that. And that's why I'm open to almost anything. But I also believe about 90% of the reports of things that are paranormal, cryptids, or whatever are hokum, right? It's because people wanted to see it. But I, there's always stuff that doesn't fit into that bucket. And so I do believe that stuff. Now, I've been to Loch Ness multiple times. I have my Nessie shirt on right now. I love the Loch Ness Monster. I have loved the Loch Ness Monster my whole life. I've been to Loch Ness 3 times, I think. Have never seen Nessie, and I really wanted to see Nessie. That having been said, I've never been to the Pacific Northwest or anything like that, but I love Bigfoot, Chupacabra, all that. I mean, Champ, all that stuff. I love cryptids. And I would say that until April of this year, I could never say I had an experience that made me go, oh, wait a minute. So I mentioned that my podcast girls and I went to Blue Ridge, Georgia on a trip.
Yeah. Hold on a second, Jennifer.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm having a really bad, deja vu right now. Like, we've had this conversation before. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, like all of a sudden I just got this weird feeling. So sorry, I just had I had to say something before you continued. So sorry to interrupt, but
I don't know,
go
maybe
ahead,
that adds gravitas to my story. But so we had this trip to Blue Ridge, Georgia. And the reason why we chose Blue Ridge, Georgia is because Betsy loves Bigfoot. And the Bigfoot Museum is in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And in fact, we had Amanda Stowers, who is Amanda the Bigfoot Lady. We had her on our show as a guest. And we went there live and in person. We met Amanda. We did all that stuff. And when we went through the center, we went literally as soon as we got off the plane. That was the first place we went, was to the Bigfoot Museum outside of Blue Ridge, Georgia. So one of the things, and I've never been to any of these. I've been to the Loch Ness Monster one in Drumnadrochit, Scotland, but I hadn't been to any Bigfoot anything anywhere, even though I love it. And we listened to sound recordings of things that people have claimed are Bigfoot noises. And there's an incredible amount of linguists and stuff like that talk about, it's almost got qualities of language and whatever, and people could definitely research that. But I had never heard any of that stuff before. So I put the little Caine headphones on. I was listening to it. And the Bigfoot sound is like a whoop, whoop. But it's not like an owl. I'm not doing it well. It sounds like a whoop, but it's high-pitched and has a very, very specific echoey cadence to it, and a timbre that's very unique. And it doesn't sound like a hoot owl, and it doesn't sound like a coyote or any of the things that I also live in the South, so all of those sounds are, big cat sounds, all that. I'm familiar with all of those sounds. And it didn't sound like anything that I could identify, and it didn't sound like, anything that obviously any of these scientists could identify because, here it was in the museum. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I was like, oh, that's neat, whatever. And then, I just took that for the fun that it was. So the next morning, Jenny slept in. She was going to sleep in a little bit, and she was going to make us breakfast when we got back because Betsy and I wanted to go for a hike in the early morning. So we headed up the road a little bit to a trailhead that was not too far from our cabin. And we went on a walk and saw this ranger cutting down trees, and he kind of, side-eyed us a little bit. He was nice, but we got a little farther and you can hear the trees cracking as they're sort of leaning. And at first that freaked me out a little bit because, I'm not used to hills because I live in Florida and it's all flat. So I wasn't familiar with that tree cracking sound. So Betsy had to explain that to me. But then as we were walking along, we're walking around this long area where we've got all trees on one side and kind of like a meadow on the other side. And out of the hills in the distance, we hear whoop, whoop, And Betsy and I just looked at each other and we went, because it was the exact sound that we had heard on the recording the day before. And Betsy has actually heard that sound. Well, not heard the sound, but she's had other experiences, and she was familiar with that sound already. And we just kind of stared at each other and went, huh. So if you can categorize that as having an experience, I have had a, let's call it experience adjacent. Not exactly a cryptid experience, but experience adjacent, and I will take it because I want to believe in it. So
I would take
I'll
it
accept
too.
it.
Yeah.
Fortunately, no experience with chupacabras because they're nasty little buggers.
Yeah, let's like not have those experiences.
No.
I've always wanted to have an Bigfoot experience, but I haven't yet. But you also have to go out in the woods, and I don't do that often enough. But I do go. I hike Mount Washington every year.
Oh wow! Okay.
I've been doing that for the past 5, 4, 6 years or something like that, and now my kids come with me. Now that they're older and they can tolerate it. But it's a good day going up to the top and then back down. And I always think that I'm gonna see something out there, but there is a lot of people too, so I don't know if it would actually, because from stories of people that like do research and have these encounters, it's usually when not a lot of people are around.
Yeah, I would think you'd probably want to be fairly remote, or at least not crowded. I mean, like I said, Betsy and I were alone. There was like literally nobody around except that ranger that we had passed a half an hour back. So, so I, there's that. But there's also apparently a very distinct smell associated with a Bigfoot. And Betsy's had that experience. She's smelled them before. And so I know you may have her on, so I'll leave that little crumb there for you to have her pick up later. But yeah, but the great love of my life, Nessie, has let me down every time I've gone to visit. Maybe I should have made an appointment. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, hey, I'm open to anything. I would love to believe that stuff is out there, because I think that believing in that just makes the world a little more wild and a little more wonderful. And I think that the longer as adults we can retain that wonder that children have, I think the happier we will be.
I would agree 110% with that statement, for sure. I try to keep my imagination alive as much as possible.
We are the Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy Podcast. I'm Declan, the son.
And I'm Jane, the mom. This is the podcast where we talk about brutal crimes like serial killers and the random one-off murder. We will tell you about bizarre occurrences like alien abductions and monsters in the dark. And we just might get you drunk with cocktails themed around one of our stories.
At the very end of every show, we like to lighten things up and cleanse the palate from the tragic and terrifying stories. So we end our time with a chaser. You might get to hear crazy stories about our pets or just silly movie recommendations.
Give us a listen. We are the Brutal, Bizarre, and Boozy Podcast.
But I kind of got going off the Lake Nessie thing. There's been a lot of people saying that it might be just a giant salamander.
So if you go to the research center, which is very scientific, by the way, the one in Scotland, the official research center, there's certainly a lot of, scientific evidence that say it couldn't be this or it could be this. The most common theories of what people scientifically, the way they explain it, is really large eels, because there are eels in that area. So really large eels. But it would have to be just absurdly large. And that also doesn't account for a lot of the sightings that accounts for some of them, but not it wouldn't explain
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah, like an
Obviously
eel couldn't have its head poking out.
Yeah, and the famous surgeon's photograph, the one that people normally think of, that one was debunked. The guy on his deathbed admitted that that was a cardboard cutout on top of a remote control boat.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that one's been debunked. But there's other things that have not been. So there was underwater research that was done, I want to say in the 60s. I don't remember the exact year, but they had underwater cameras, and of course it was, it wasn't like today's sonar or whatever, but it was, they had, the waters of the loch are very dark, and very silty, so they're very difficult to see, and so divers, it's also stupid cold, so divers wouldn't be able to be very effective. So what they had was they had a motion sensor on a camera that if the sonar were triggered or something went by it, it would instantly flash this camera. And they do have several extremely clear pictures of diamond-shaped fins that are about this big. I mean, I have copies of them somewhere in here, but I just don't have them handy. But so to me, even when I first saw the surgeon's photograph when I was a kid, I was like, I don't know, man. It's not like they're going to sit there and pose, or everybody would be seeing these all the time. So I had enough wherewithal to know that probably wasn't real, even though it hadn't been debunked yet. But the fin thing was done by a scientific research team. That was not done by some random dude just, out there on his boat. So they were there specifically for that, using very scientific methods. So for me, that's probably one of the more, like, I'm going to hold on to that last little scrap of hope that it's not just an eel. I'm going to hold on to that. And just like that one string that's coming out of the tassel, that's what I'm going to hold on to for as long as I possibly can. So I'm actually going to write do you remember Choose Your Own Adventure books, or are you too young for that?
Yes.
Okay.
I used to read those all the time.
So when I finish the Ironshields series, or maybe I'll do it at the same time, I'm actually going to write a series of those that are based on cryptids. And it's going to be called the Portals series. And it's going to be, the first one will be the Loch Ness Monster. I've already written about 40 pages of it. And it'll be a choose your own adventure, middle grade oriented, but I don't know, as an adult, I still love choose your own adventure books. I think they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, they are a lot of fun. I even play the video games that's choose your own adventure kind of stuff. Like,
see, the Gen Xers out there who are listening are going to go, Dragon's Lair, man, Dragon's Lair. But you probably wouldn't remember that because you're too young.
No, but R.L. Stein wrote some.
Oh,
R.L. Stein wrote some of them, and I enjoyed those.
I love R.L. Stein.
Yeah. So
yeah, I enjoy the Goosebumps books and all that. I did his master class online.
No way.
He did a fiction writing master class, and it was really good. It was really enjoyable.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I loved all of those books. I had so many. And then they made it a TV series, and I was like, "Well, that is crazy."
Now, I mean, I'm going to geek out a little bit since we've gone into Goosebumps territory. The movies with Jack Black are amazing. If you've never seen them, you must see them. We watched them with my daughter, it's funny, she's got the heart of a little goth princess, but she doesn't like scary things. It's hysterical. So she's never read any of the Goosebumps books. We bought her some, but she loved the movies. So if we've seen the movies, she adored them. It was like a huge thing. But I would easily watch those every Halloween or whatever. I love them. They're great.
Yes. Yeah, they did a really good job with them, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pretty happy with it. I was not just with everything like that when they try to do nostalgic stuff for movies. I'm always like, is it gonna be good though? Am I gonna like it? And
they had just the
those.
right amount, I think, of not taking it too seriously. You know what I mean? Like, it was, they didn't try to make it a horror movie. They had exactly the spirit of sort of horror comedy that R.L. Stein has in the Goosebumps books, where it's these absurd things like garden gnomes attacking you, or whatever, like that kind of stuff. And it's funny at its core. So I felt like they really embraced that and leaned into it, and that was the difference. That was the difference. Is you got to have somebody who gets the world.
Yeah, it felt like
It was like
the
having Peter
original
Jackson make Lord
Ghostbusters.
of the Rings. You just get somebody who understands the world.
Yeah, exactly. It felt very Ghostbustery to me,
Yes.
where it was scary but not scary and funny.
Right.
So, like as in the original Ghostbusters, the ones that Dan Aykroyd wrote. So that's how it felt to me when I watched them, and I was like, "This is cool. This is awesome."
I love the ones with Paul Rudd though too. I'm not gonna lie, they have the spirit. I think.
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't
no,
see the
Dan
one.
Aykroyd wrote those too.
Yeah, I
The new
did.
ones.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And they definitely are an appropriate legacy for that incredible franchise. I didn't even see the
Absolutely.
one with the 4 women, and that's not because they're 4 women. It's because everybody told the movie was awful, so I didn't go see it. I usually
I gave it a
rely on
chance.
my cousin Michael with movies like that because he's a big movie guy. And if he says a movie is awful, I generally trust him. So,
So, have you ever had an experience that scared you so much that you thought that it was possible, like life threatening?
ooh, I don't think paranormally I would say I've ever had anything I would say was life threatening. Um, largely because most ghosts don't scare me. I
Right.
did have a poltergeist experience once that was just patently unpleasant. And that's the story that I told on the Mako podcast, where I was underground in Edinburgh and a poltergeist scratched my neck. And I didn't enjoy that very much.
I don't think anybody would have.
No, that was not. But I wasn't in fear of life or limb. It was unpleasant. I think the only times I've felt genuine fear in my life have been when I was afraid for someone else, not for myself. And I think that's just sort of the way that I'm wired. Is that I've had a couple of car accidents where you could say that probably if I had had time to think about it, my life would have flashed before my eyes or things like that. But those kinds of things, they don't scare me. They might alarm me in that moment. But I think we fear our own death a lot less than we fear the death of the people we love or harm to the people we love.
Yeah,
and so
I would agree with that.
yeah, the most of the fears that I've had that have been real fears have been around the harm to others who I love. So my husband, for example, has a double lung transplant. And so for a while he was quite ill before that happened. And I had sort of a constant state of fear for a couple years before his transplant, because he was just really in rough shape. So that wasn't like a momentary, like alarm type fear. That was just a constant fear. My mother has Alzheimer's, and for the longest time we couldn't get them to move into get her into a memory care community. And I was constantly afraid that she would wander off in the middle of the night and my stepfather wouldn't hear her, and something horrible would happen to her because she was definitely a wanderer. So, but those are all kind of like a constant hum of fear that is over the course of years, not so much the kind of thing you're talking about, which is a little more splashy and sensational.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I've had a couple of them.
Oh, have you?
Myself, where it's been like, where I'm like I'm gonna die or something. Like I didn't. Obviously, I'm still here. I'm talking to you right now. Unless I'm the
Right.
spirit. You never
Or
know.
are you? Yes. There you go. But I can see you, so I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I've had, a few of those too, where like I'm still, since the day my son was born in 2008, I've been scared every night. So
Mm-hmm.
so this when my kid, like, I'm not with my ex-wife now, so
Mm-hmm.
I go a couple days without seeing my kids sometimes, but when
Mm-hmm.
they're here, I have to, it's been ever since the day they were born, I have to go in their room at some point. If I wake up in the middle of the
Yep.
night or whatever, I have to go in and I have to put my hand in front of their nose to make sure they're breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have to feel their breath. Like, I can see their chest falls and stuff like that, but I have to feel their breath. I don't
Yeah.
know what it is, but I have
No,
to.
I totally get that. I totally get that. So my daughter is we adopted her from Korea, and I used to love like true crime dramas, stuff like that. I watched Law and Order SVU religiously. As soon as I became a mom, I couldn't watch things where kids were in danger anymore.
Yeah.
It caused such a reaction in me that I remember we watched. This is one of those things where people are gonna find this funny, but I swear to you, as a parent, you will understand.
Mhm.
In X-Men First Class, have you seen it?
Yep.
Origin story of Magneto. So there's a scene at the very beginning where Magneto sees his mother die. You know the scene I'm
Yes.
talking about?
Yep.
I had my husband pause the movie, and I literally just went upstairs. My daughter was very small and she was sleeping, and I just literally sat on the floor in her room, listened to her breathe, and cried. Because the thought of something happening to me right in front of her and traumatizing her for her whole life is the first thing that went in my mind. And that, as a
Mhm.
parent, so I totally get it. And flashing back to your previous conversation, you said, is there anything where I've been so scared that, like, almost like paralyzed with fear, almost, is like,
Yeah.
I have had one dream in my life, and I blocked it out until you brought up kids. One dream that left me so terrified as an adult. And I had night terrors every once in a while as a kid, but I had a dream that my daughter, as a toddler, well, like a 4-year-old, we were in a warehouse, and I was trying to get to her because she was up on some beam or something that she shouldn't be, and I saw her fall. And I I woke up crying. I have never been so scared in my life. And it wasn't a dream. I knew what, I mean, wasn't real. I knew it wasn't real. And I understand dreams, and I understand how to interpret dreams. And I knew what that dream meant. What my brain was trying to tell me is that, that as a mother, I'm afraid of bad things happening to my daughter, and that I can't control everything in her life. I get all that. Like, I understand
Mhm.
Jungian dream interpretation, but I've never felt terror like that in my life. Even after I woke up, I was so terrified because I literally couldn't get that image out of my head. It took me a week before I could sleep right because of that image being in my head.
Wow.
And as
Yeah.
a dad, I'm sure you understand. It's the same thing.
Yes.
I went upstairs,
Yeah.
put my hand on my daughter's back, and made sure that she was breathing. And then I don't think I slept again that night. So yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
My
not exactly a splashy story, but something parents would relate to, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most of my ghost stories
Uh,
aren't scary. They're good stories. They're like happy stories.
yeah, I mean, good ghost stories are
Yeah.
fantastic too,
Well,
Not
I
everything has to
actually
be
saved for you
spooky.
my best ghost story. I saved my very best ghost story, which I have never told on air before,
Oh,
but
okay.
I will happily tell you. So up to now, the worst day of my life was the day my little sister died. She
Sorry to
was
hear that.
26 years old, and she had sepsis, and she was in a coma. I went in her room when she was still in a coma, and I could hear her, right? I could hear her presence. I could hear her voice in my head. So I knew she knew we were there. And then one night I got a call in the middle of the night to go to the hospital. And I knew it wasn't going to be good, because if they call you at 3 a.m. to come to the hospital, it's never good.
Mhm.
So I got up there, and I started to walk into her room, and I didn't feel her. I didn't hear her. And I was like, I'm not going in. I'm not going in, because I knew she wasn't there anymore. So I was, I've always been kind of pissed off at my dad when he died, because I was the only person in the family that could hear ghosts, and he never visited me after he died. And I was always pissed about that. And I told my sister this, and I'm sitting there with my family, and they still hadn't pronounced her dead or anything. But I'm sitting there with various members of my family that had shown up, and my sister's fiance. And all of a sudden, I'm standing with this group of people, and I'm like, I have to go to the chapel right now. I have to go find the chapel immediately. And I just literally got up and left my whole family and went to go find the chapel on another floor of the hospital. So, and the minute I walked into the chapel, and again, this was like 3:30 in the morning, the minute I walked into the chapel, I could hear my sister's voice. And she said, see, I didn't do to you what Dad did. And then I was like, damn it, because I knew what that meant. And I just, so I was like, oh, damn. And I said, does it have to be this way? And she said, no, I could stay, but I would be like that forever. And I said, well, I can't ask you to stay then. And she said, don't worry, I'll be around. But I need you to do something for me. And I said, what's that? She said, I need you to take care of Matt. Matt was her fiance. And I was like, what do you mean take care of Matt? She said, I need you to take care of Matt now. And I was like, what? So I'm walking, and then she was gone. And then I walked out, and I was like, I knew by the time I got upstairs, they would have pronounced her. So I start walking back to where my family is. And all of a sudden, I hear them coding somebody. And I didn't know where in the hospital, but when they called this code, I knew immediately it had to do with Matt. I knew it was Matt. And sure enough, he had a heart attack, a minor one, when they came in and kind of told everybody. And so by the time I got up there, I saw the back of him getting wheeled away in a wheelchair to go to another part of the hospital. And so anyway, that was kind of, that was a really rough night. But Matt and I had kind of bonded over that period of time. And when it came time for my sister's funeral, now understand, my sister was one of those people you could not sit next to in church or at any serious function, because she would say something completely inappropriate and crack you up at the worst times. She had the most inappropriate sense of humor I have ever known, and, reveled in it. So we went to, she lived in the town where I live in Tampa, and a lot of her friends were there. So they were going to not bury her in Tampa, but they were going to have a memorial in Tampa. So we went to the memorial, and I was to give the eulogy. So I had put this eulogy together. And when I got up there to speak, and it was a good speech, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was a pretty good speech. So I got up there, and I kind of was like wondering, why she hadn't made an appearance yet, because I kind of figured she would. And I got up on stage, and I was facing all these people, and I started telling this story. And then all of a sudden, I start hearing, and I mean, I wasn't even at the good part of the speech yet. This was still kind of the intro part. And I hear this sound from in the middle of the crowd. I'm like, what is that? Is somebody crying? What is that? And I hear my sister's voice behind me, and I apologize, you can beep this out if this is too salty for your readers, but I hear my sister start laughing behind me and saying, are you fucking kidding me? I hear her voice, and I look in the audience, and my cousin's wife has brought her emotional support pug to the funeral. And so this pug is in the middle, and I'm doing this, and people are crying, and as I'm doing this eulogy, all I can hear is because this dog has a sinus condition. The dog, by the way, was wearing a tutu. Oh my dog. So I'm sitting up there, and I'm like, I have to finish this speech. I can't laugh. I can't laugh. And I hear my sister laughing behind me. And I'm like, shut up. Because I knew she was trying to make me laugh during the thing. So I knew she would visit me. I just didn't know it was going to be right then. So I get through the rest of the speech and I sit down, and I had appropriate decorum. I managed not to crack up, and I thank many years of teaching speech and public speaking for the experience of being able to keep myself together. So I sit there, and then my stepmother, who is actually my sister's mom, she didn't speak or anything, and who could blame her? God bless her. She was just absolutely wrecked. But she had a friend who was a musician who had put together some of the music for the show. So we listened to some other people talk and whatever. And then he gets up and he says, okay, so, I'm gonna sing a song that, makes me think of Allison. So he starts singing, Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven. Very appropriate for a funeral. But I don't know if you've ever seen Will Ferrell do the middle school music teacher bit on Saturday Night Live, but if you haven't, that's what this was. It was like watching Will Ferrell do a lounge singer, and he was doing like, would you know my name? Yeah. If, like the whole thing, and it was hysterical. And I'm sitting there and I'm next to Matt because my husband at that time was too ill to come to the funeral. So I'm sitting next to Matt and I literally grab Matt's arm and he and I start snickering and we couldn't stop. And I can hear my sister laughing, and I've got Matt, and I hadn't told Matt any of this, but I'm clinging to Matt, and so we bent over because we're laughing, and it was other people thought we were crying, but we were laughing. So then the guy gets up, and a couple more people talk, and the guy comes up and starts singing Yesterday, and it was the same thing. It was like, yesterday, hey. All my troubles seem so fun. And I'm dying. And Matt and I are like trembling, laughing. Meanwhile, I mean, there could not have been a better tribute to my sister, by the way. This was so inappropriate and weird. And she would have loved every minute of it. In fact, she was laughing through the whole thing. So then at the end, Matt and I at this point, we've managed to hide our raucous laughter from everyone around us, including my stepmother, who was sitting right in front of us. And I cannot imagine how traumatizing it would have been if she had heard us laughing. And at the end, this guy gets up and he says, well, I picked this next song because I like it. And he gets up and he sings, oh gosh, what's the name of that song? What If God Was One of Us? Do you remember that song?
Oh my goodness, yes.
And he does it the same way. So it's, what if God was, and he's doing call and response to the audience at a funeral. And Matt and I we couldn't take it anymore. We're just doubled over. And then at one point, like the most pivotal line in the whole song is at the end of the song where it's like, what if God was one of us? And, he's making his way back home on a bus all alone or whatever. And no one's calling on the phone. And in the line in the song is, except the Pope may be in Rome. Right. And the whole thing is about it's a very poignant sort of statement about our lack of faith or whatever. But so instead of saying maybe, except the Pope may be in Rome, he says, except Allison. And that was it. He substituted my sister's name into the song, and Matt and I that's it. We were on the floor. We just couldn't take it anymore. We were literally we had tears streaming down our faces. And it was hysterical. And then subsequent to that, every time I've gone into this one particular store, it's a metaphysical shop here in Tampa. Every time I go in there, my sister throws something at me. So
awesome.
I go in, yeah. So I'll go in there, and those little business card holders, they'll fly off the counter. She'll throw them at me to let me know she's around. She literally, and my daughter was standing right there. She literally ripped the glasses off my face. I was wearing reading glasses to read something. She whipped them off my face, and the screw, like she pulled them off my face so hard that the screw went flying out of my. Oh. Every time I go in that store, and the mediums that are in, because a lot of times they have readers in that store, would just be cracking up, like, because they don't know that I know she's there. They just think it's like, some dumb customer who doesn't know. And But yeah. So my sister has been, she makes little flybys once in a while, always with something inappropriate to say, always something, something cheeky, because that's just who she is. But yeah, so and I think that
Cool
just,
though.
like I said, ghosts are just people, and
They are.
a lot of times they retain that same personality, and in her case, that is a very shenanigans related personality.
I would say so. I would say so. I feel like I would do the same stuff to my siblings, to be
Oh,
honest
I've
with you.
promised my daughter. I have promised my daughter that there will be shenanigans, and I will haunt her for the rest of her days, if only to mess with her. I've promised her that.
That's
So
hilarious.
if I have a
That's
choice in the
hilarious.
matter, that's how it's going to go down.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for that story. There was, as you go through it, I was feeling like different emotions through the whole thing. Like there was a part where I kind of wanted to cry, and then you would just went into the funny stuff, and then I started laughing. So that was a little bit of a roller coaster for me, lady.
Well, I'm glad you rode along. I'm glad you rode along, because isn't that life, though?
Yes,
So
it is. It is. You're not wrong. But I appreciate you telling the story. Um, and I appreciate you, coming on. And I'll ask you my favorite closing question real quick.
okay.
Um, so are you finding with your all your books and everything and your
hmm
podcast, are you finding fulfillment in your life with all everything you have going on?
I feel more myself than I have ever felt in my life. So I retired from teaching last year after 30 years. I had done my time in the trenches. And at that point, I was going to take my pension and focus on being a full-time writer. Um, and I'm blessed that my family has been so supportive of that journey, because writers really don't make any money. I hate to tell you, unless you
Mm-hmm.
get optioned for a film. Um, but I feel like I am living my most authentic life now. Um, I am the person that I always have been inside. So I was a teacher for 30 years. I loved my kids. I loved my job, but I wouldn't have defined myself that way. But I always defined myself as a storyteller, as a
Mm.
writer. So yes, I am definitely fulfilled in doing that. And the stories I write because I want to share with people, not because I necessarily am expecting a big paycheck out of it. That's why I don't write just the stuff that I know will make money. If I wanted to make money, I'd write trashy romance novels, and nothing wrong with that, but that's just not my gig.
Yeah.
Um, I tend to write things that involve magic and wonder, and I write some horror as well, so the dark side of those things as well as the light side of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like that's a very, very good reflection of who I am. And um, if your listeners go to my website, I'm sure they'll see that in the blogs and see that in the newsletters. They'll see that reflected, because it is who I am. And I love every minute of it, even writing chapter 3. Even writing chapter 3, I still love it.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you and everything that you've accomplished. Um, and I look forward to seeing more of you. And I definitely, because your books sound intriguing to me, and so I'm gonna have to check them out. My daughter's kind of into this like little like witchy stuff, and she's 13, so they might be right up her alley too. So
Well, and I will
I'll
tell
have
you
to
that
read them
all
with
of my
her.
books, the Ironshields series and the Arcana series, are written
Mm-hmm.
so that, I mean, they obviously have some things that are scary or whatever, but they're things that parents don't have to feel nervous about their kids reading. So I don't put spice in my YA. Not to say that there's no romance at all, but it's really not romance forward. And there's nothing in it, even in the Ironshields series, which is more high fantasy. I still dial the violence back enough so that kids aren't getting body horror if they pick it up. So I do try to keep it everybody friendly. So if she's interested, I would love to hear what she thinks.
Yeah.
I kind of want to have her read the horror stuff, though. The horror stuff, maybe I kind of take the brakes off a little.
She's actually starting to become more of a horror fan, which is pretty amazing. My son is the older. He's going to be 16 in a couple months.
Okay.
And
he's all
he's
good.
learning to he's learning to drive and everything, but he doesn't want anything to do with horror movies. Like me and my daughter watched the new It movies together just the other day,
So she can
like a
handle
couple
it.
weeks ago. Yeah, and he won't, and my son's like, no. And my daughter's only 13, but
but she's a daddy's girl right there.
Yeah, she's coming into she's definitely coming into in the horror stuff, so I'm happy about that because that's what I like. That's the stuff that I like.
That's bonding right there. And by the way, happy 37th anniversary of the Lost Boys release. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Of course, by the time this airs, the anniversary will have passed, but still.
Yes. But still, it's in the general area.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you don't mind, one last time letting the people know, where they can find your podcast,
Sure.
and where they can find your books.
Sure. Well, all my books are for sale on Amazon. You can certainly find Iron Shield as well on pretty much any bookseller. Those are available wide, so Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, all that stuff. You can find Iron Shield there. And the Arcana series is definitely on Amazon. I don't know if my publisher has released it wide yet. I know they're going to, but I don't know if they have yet. My website is www.jbcaine.com. And our podcast, the Unfreakingbelievable Podcast, is www.ufbpodcast.com. So we're pretty easy to find. And if you happen to message me on socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, I'm at author JB Caine on any of those. And if someone messages you back, it is definitely really me. I am not cool enough to have a personal assistant.
Well, JB, I really appreciate you coming on tonight and telling us some of your stories. Time is our greatest currency, and the fact that you took the time to do this with me means the world to me, because if I didn't have people like you to talk to, I'd just be talking to myself. Not that I wouldn't do it, I just don't know if it'd be entertaining. So thank you.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Yeah. And I'm definitely going to check out your books, and everybody at home, all the links are going to be in the show notes. So definitely check her out. Check out the podcast. Leave them a 5-star rating, leave a review, all that stuff. I would appreciate it if you did that. And I'm sure they would as well. But if you do decide to check out her books, please leave a review on those as well. That would be great, and it would be helpful. So
Please,
with that
being
yes. So with that being said, question everything and stay weird.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.
Because in the end, none of us have very long on this earth. Life is fleeting. And if you're ever distressed, cast your eyes to the summer sky. When the stars are strung across the velvety night, and when a shooting star streaks through the blackness, turning night into day. make a wish.